What if none of the Jazz young players pan out? Is it truly the worst case scenario? It's not great. Next on Locked on Jazz.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
How are you? I am David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz. Today's show, we're going to kick it off with finish it up with a Will's Wednesday. As will talk about Ace Bailey and the need to go to the free throw line and how a player develops that skill. We'll look at the Jazz salary cap situation for the next 2 days. Boy, isn't that exciting to look at. Kyle Anderson speaks out about his time in Utah, and we'll have that for you. But we're starting off with what happens if none of the Jazz young players that we're watching, Isaiah Collier, Cody Williams, Brice Sensabaugh, Kyle Filipowski, pan out. Is it the worst case scenario for the Utah Jazz? Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. All right. So this is my first stab at really doing the money issue that the Jazz have with the new roster. I will openly admit that the people like Dan Clayton over at SLC Dunk and some others probably do it better than I do it. But what my goal, I'm going to do it a little bit bigger picture here for a second with some round numbers to try to make it digestible and not as geeky. Okay. The question here is that we're trying to answer: how incredibly vital is it for the Utah Jazz for Isaiah Collier, Brice Sensabaugh, Kyle Filipowski, and Cody Williams to hit, or just to be viable for them to be able to survive salary-wise? Okay. I'm going to give you some things. First number we're going to remember is 200. That's basically where the first apron is. And as much as anything else, the Jazz have $200 million to spend on salary next year before they hit the first apron. It's 196, but 200. Okay. The Jazz currently have between Lauri Markkanen, Jaren Jackson Jr., Ace Bailey, Walker Kessler at $25 million a year. That's what I put him in as. Might be high. It's ballpark. Keyonte next year, just $6 million. Svi Mykhailiuk and their draft pick. Okay. So that gives the Jazz 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players. Feels like it should only give them 7. That gives the Jazz 7 players. So your starting lineup next year, which we're presuming is Key, Ace, Lauri, Jaren, and Walker, with the draft pick and Svi Mykhailiuk. We don't have a backup point guard. We don't have a shooter off the bench, unless we think it's Svi. We don't have a backup center. And we probably need some sort of other wing player. We have about 4 big roster spots that have to get filled there. Okay, so our first number is 200. Our second number is 150. Guess what our third number is? 50, right? They add up 200. So for the remaining 8 roster spots next year, in the simplest form, the Jazz have about $50 million. Well, under the ideal world, Isaiah Collier at 2.7, Brice Sensabaugh at 4.8, Kyle Filipowski at $3 million, and Cody Williams at $6 million can contribute. If nothing else, if those guys are all on the roster, which likely seems, that you have $30 million for the other 4 spots. So you could suddenly go sign Jusuf Nurkic on a 1-year deal as your backup center for $8 million, probably without a problem. Then you have $22 million for your next 3 spots. And you probably could go sign some other veteran player in there for $7 or $8 million to be your backup point guard and help out Keyonte, and now you've got another $14 million for another two guys. And it's not quite right because I don't have quite enough roster spots because you have to get to 18, but I have 15 there. It actually works. And to some extent, the good news is that if Isaiah Collier, Brice, Sensabaugh, Kyle Filipowski, and Cody Williams are actually roster spots 11, 12, 13, and 14 next year and non-rotation players, it actually turns out fine for a year. That's what's kind of crazy here. If I've done this correctly and we walk through this correctly, we have $200 million to spend. We have 150 currently under the roster for 7 players. If you add Collier at $2.3 million, Sensabaugh at $5 million, I'm rounding up, Kyle Filipowski at $3 million, and Cody at $6 million, that comes out to $17 million amongst the 4 players. Right around there. And all of a sudden, you have, we're using round numbers, we're calling it 20, $30 million for the other 4 roster spots, which probably turns out to be fine. And you actually have a pretty deep roster. The key to this whole thing is if you're Denver and you have Julian Strawther at $2 million and Bruce Brown Jr. at $2 million, Tim Hardaway at $2 million. That's the key to the whole thing. Boston's got Sam Hauser at 10, Pritchard at 7, Hugo at 2.7, Kate at 2.7, Luka Garza at 2.7. You got to have some of those. Here's what's so fascinating about this is it would be outstanding for the Jazz if Isaiah Collier at 2.7 could be the backup point guard next year, and you really believed he was going to be good enough to do that, because then it opens up a ton of money to be able to be used on your backup center and your bench scorer and some things like that. It'd be great if you believe Brice Sensabaugh $5 million is that player that fits into that spot as a role player, because then it opens up a ton of money. If none of them pan out, you decide that Isaiah's lack of shooting and lack of defense is just too much, and Brice's lack of defense and he's not as good a shooter as we hoped doesn't pan out. I'm being really negative here. And Kyle just can't muster. I think Kyle actually has a spot perfectly on this roster. I'll explain it in a second. It's just not backup center. It's the 5th big at $3 million a year. It's perfect. And the Cody can't pan, and those guys are all going to be still in developmental stage or still just there, and they're at 11, 12, 13, and 14 on the roster. You can survive it. You sign the next 4 or 5 guys for $30 million. If Collier can be that guy, now you have $30 million for 3 spots. If, right, like, actually have a little bit more, because that's, you have $30 million for 3 spots. If Sensabaugh can be that guy, then you have $30 million for 3 spots. If 2 of them can be those guys, though honestly, I don't think there's a spot needed for Kyle in there unless you think he's the backup center. He's not the backup center. So just eliminate that thought. If Cody suddenly bursts and you think Cody's going to be ready, starts having a great offseason, you've got $30 million for 3 guys. That's the impact in the first year. So honestly, if none of them pan out for a year, it's just not that big a deal. I know that's crazy, but Austin Ainge is tasked right now with $30 million to go fill 4 roster spots. A backup point guard, a scorer off the bench, a backup center, and probably another rotation player you're comfortable with. But frankly, at that point, Brice should be able to do that for a year. Maybe Cody can do that for a year, and Flip can be your 5th pick. It's not that big a deal. What gets really tricky is the next season. And that's when these guys become absolutely vital to the Jazz success. We'll touch on that, plus Kyle Anderson speaks out next on Locked on Jazz. Today's show is brought to you by my friends over at Intercap Lending. We've had a wonderful relationship with Steve Carter. He's our own personal loan officer over at Intercap. He's just done fabulous work. There's nothing makes me happier when I get the email from someone that says I'm in the market for a refi or a house or something like that, and I get to move them to Steve Carter because Steve will respond within literally like 5 minutes every time. And I know someone's going to have the best experience they could possibly imagine. Rates have come down since last month, and so we're seeing more people reach out and start refinancing. If you're in that book, here's what Steve's doing for people. He's had people reach out to cash out loans to pay off other debts. He's had a bunch of people say, all right, let's figure out as rates come down what the time is and what my path is and when the right time to do it is. He doesn't mind doing that at all. A quick review. You can tell someone if the savings are there now or when the rates need to be worthwhile. Also, with construction loans, continue to offer a strong 2-time closed construction loan. If someone already owns their land, that land can be used forward toward their down payment. And then there's also an option to defer interest payments during construction, which helps with cash flow while the home is being built. So it all is there. Steve can handle conventional FHA, VA. He's also licensed in 43 states. So it's all there for you. Email me at dlock09@gmail.com. That's dlock09@gmail.com. dlock09@gmail.com. I'll set you up with your VIP meeting with Steve Carter that you deserve for being a locked on every day. Today's show is brought to you by TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Try to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they've really got your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications and you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local to find the store near you and book your appointment today at TurboTax. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. Thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network in the country. Thank you so much. Wait 1 second. Needed fuel and needed notes. And they were both over there. Actually needed water, but I'm getting coffee. All right. So we did year 1 of this. Here's where things get really interesting. When we pay Keyonte. So let's assume Keyonte gets 30. And that takes 25. That's 25 more than he made the year before. Everybody else actually moves kind of similarly. Ace would go up a little bit. This new draft pick would go up a tiny bit. Lowry stays. Lowry goes up $3 more million. Jaren Jackson goes up another $1 million. Gets a little tight. Okay, so Jaren Jackson goes up $1 more million. Lowry goes up $3 more million. And so the Jazz and Keyonte, let's say Keyonte goes to 30. So Keyonte would go from 6.5 to 30. And you add in all of those other little increments of Lowry up 3 and Jaren Jackson up 1. So let's call it a $30 million jump. Now, all of a sudden, the Jazz only have $20 million for 8 roster spots. And that's when this gets really, really, really tight. That's almost impossible. And they've almost conceded at that point that they're going to go over the first apron for a year or two, which makes things hard because Ace jumps to 12 the year after that and Lowry's deal. But here's what gets tricky about that. And that's where this gets super interesting about actually how important it is whether these young guys actually contribute. And that is there even a spot for them? So Cody Williams in 27-28 is $7.7 million non-guaranteed right now. Well, the Jazz keep Cody Williams at $7.7 million. He has to be playing 25 to 30 minutes a night by then. I think. Unless I'm doing something wrong. Because we only have $20 million for 8 players. Of that $20 million, we still need a backup center somewhere who's going to be a minimum player, 2.7. We still need, unless it's the guy we just drafted in our point guard, a backup guard to Keyonte, unless it's who we drafted. Still need a scorer off the bench. Hopefully Ace is scoring enough. Guys are scoring enough. You've got that, or just a shooter. So suddenly, actually keeping Cody in 27-28 on his rookie deal at 7.7 is really difficult. Brice Sensabaugh also has to be paid the same way Keyonte does at that point. Now, Sam Hauser's getting 10 and Peyton Pritchard's getting 7. And if Brice Sensabaugh were as good as one of those two guys, can you get him on that type of a deal? Maybe, but if not sure that Brice Sensabaugh fits at that point. Isaiah Collier will be at $5 million at that point. Isaiah Collier better really be able to play at $5 million. The way Tim Hardaway at 2.3, Bruce Brown at 2.3, Julian Strawther at 2.6, that at $5 million, Isaiah Collier needs to be able to really contribute. 15 to 20 minutes a night. And then interestingly is that Flip comes in at $3 million, which is like the perfect number. It's a little big for your 5th big, but it kind of fits. So there's a weird thing here going on. As much as every single day we're talking about whether these young guys can fit and contribute and be a part of it, that the dollar figures, if I'm doing this right, in 2 years, get to be it's hard for them to fit anyway. The Jazz have a decision coming up here whether they pick up Cody's option. They may not. Because at $7 million, when you only have, if I'm right, now let's say the cap goes up a little bit. Let's say the apron goes up. So let's say you have $25 million for 8 players. Cody's going to take 33% of that. He better be able to play 25, 30 minutes a night. Collier at $5 million is probably viable. What's Brice going to want in free agency? That might not work. So what's really fascinating as I did this, and I started this exercise honestly out, is like, what happens if none of these guys pan out? How screwed are we? Maybe not at all. Maybe we're actually more screwed if they totally pan out. Ironically enough. Like if Brice clicks in and suddenly gets, I will be very surprised if the Jazz offer Brice Sensabaugh this offseason when they can extension eligible a deal that has any big numbers on it. They just don't have the financial flexibility to do it. Svi Mikhailuk at $4 million. You're literally probably making a decision at that point of whether or not you want Svi Mikhailuk at $4 million or Brice Sensabaugh at $4 million. Brice Sensabaugh has to take $4 million. Svi Mikhailuk's already signed for $4 million. And Svi Mikhailuk's part of that number thing. Svi Mikhailuk becomes a very valuable player for the Utah Jazz, salary structure-wise. So I find this really, really interesting about this like yin and yang of if they really work, that's great. But like if Cody really, really breaks out, that's terrific. He kind of has to. He's on the books for 6 next year, and the year after that would be 7. And then frankly, if Cody really breaks out and is playing 25, 30 minutes a night, signing him for the 28-29 season gets really complicated. Because if I've got my numbers right, and we don't know exactly what the aprons are, and again, I'll say I think Dan Clayton, SLC Duncan, other guys do this better than I do. I'm just trying to use round numbers to make it understandable. I think we have about $20, $25 million for 8 players. And that's why Denver's signing guys for 2.6 and 2.3 and 2.3 and you have Boston has Hugo at 2.7 and Kate at 2.7 and Garza at 2.7. Because when you have 8 players for $20 million, that's how the math works. And that's even tight, right? Because $8 million for 2 is 2.5 on average. So what happens? So here's what's most fascinating. For the next year, when we talk about these 4 guys, the guy who's the furthest behind in Cody Williams probably is the one with the biggest urgency to hit fast, because you have to start making decisions about whether or not you're picking up his $7.7 million option for the 27-28 season, where we're really tight. And you got to be projecting Cody Williams in the 27-28 season being 25 minutes a night at that point. That's a 25-minute-a-night player in this salary structure. Kyle Filipowski is actually slotted perfectly and looks to me as though he's going to be a valuable member of this team at $3 million a year for each of the next 2 seasons. Isaiah Collier at 4.9 is kind of about double the price of the $2.7 million player and needs to show that he's double that value of a minimum player. And Brice Sensabaugh for a year is interesting, but as a restricted free agent in 27-28 seems unlikely. So that's the impact of these deals. Kyle Anderson speaks out about his time with the Utah Jazz, and Will Hardy talks about Ace Bailey and the free throw line. It's all coming up on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Today's show is brought to you in part by our friends over at Game Time. Oops, I went early. Today's show is brought to you in part by our friends over at Game Time. As I told you last week, I used Game Time to buy my Head in the Heart tickets. It was super fun. It's nothing like being in the arena, the crowd, the energy, the moment, getting tickets. Part has always not been so easy. That's been the hard part. Well, it's not hard anymore. That's why Game Time's become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back to where it belongs with the fans. Pulled up the Game Time app. I picked that concert. I had tickets within minutes, literally an email within a minute, all taken care of. I saw the all-up front pricing, no surprise fees. I had the view from the seat. I had zone deals if I wanted to. Choose the section. Game Time picks the seats, and you save. Great last-minute options, too, with NBA tickets showing up at solid prices. Everything feels quick, intuitive, and stress-free from start to finish. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. Remember, it's gametime.co, not gametime.com. That's gametime.co. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz the first listen of the day. All right. Kyle Anderson, I thought this was really interesting, was asked about his time in Utah. I don't even want to get into it, said Kyle. Honestly, I had a lot of fun in the organization, and everyone in the organization was awesome. Obviously, playing not to win games gets a little tricky and tough. I didn't enjoy it personally, but the staff, the players, I love the players. The staff's really cool. The people in the organization are awesome. Nothing bad to say about it. Here's something that I actually shared, if you heard me, early in the year. I thought Kyle Anderson was going to be the one who the Jazz had the most difficult time keeping happy during the year. Kyle Anderson does not think he's done yet in any way, shape, or form. Kyle Anderson does not think that thinks he can still contribute and play, does not think he's on the downside of his career from my conversations with him. And so the idea that Kyle was going to have to play this non-win focused basketball, let young players develop in front of him, Kevin Love kind of gets where he is in his career, right? Nurkic had a large role. Svi Mykhailiuk kind of gets where he is in the pecking order of things and just keeps progressing like a total stud, perfect team player, and is just going to keep a long NBA career because of it. Kyle Anderson believed that he could really contribute and could be on a team that helped win playoff games like he is now with the Minnesota Timberwolves. That was clear when talking to him early in the season with some sit-down conversations. And so I always thought it was going to be a rub throughout the year of like whether Kyle Anderson stayed happy or not. And I didn't know Kyle Anderson at all, so I didn't know, does that mean Kyle Anderson's going to cause like difficulties or what Kyle Anderson's going to be like. Turned out he was great. He didn't cause difficulty. He wasn't super happy with it, but I don't think he caused any problems internally. And he's kind of said it perfectly right there. I didn't like it. In other words, I didn't like sitting out certain games. I didn't like not being on the floor. I didn't like other guys getting my minutes when I thought I was better than them. But I had a lot of fun in the organization. Everyone in the organization was awesome. The staff, the players, I love the players. The staff is really cool. The people in the organization are awesome. It's pretty good. All right. Will Hardy. I asked Will Hardy the other day about Ace Bailey's lack of free throw shooting. So here's what, there's two parts to this. I thought it was really interesting, and this is our Will edition of Will's Win.
What does Ace need to do to go to the free throw line more? You know, is it all disconcerting at how rarely he goes to the free throw line?
I mean, the free throw line needs to be a part of his life moving forward. I think right now, Ace, when he's attacking the basket, we've got to continue to help him do a better job of playing through the first bump. He's such a great athlete vertically that right now he's taking that bump to sort of create a little bit of space and shoot his mid-range, play over the top of his defender. And the reality is, to get the whistle, you have to play through that contact with force. Ace also plays off the ball a lot in our offense right now, so I'm not sure that I've done a great job of putting him in a ton of positions to get to the free throw line, but playing in straight lines, playing through the outside of people's bodies as opposed to trying to go around them, I think is a big part of his future. Adding some strength to his frame, and as he continues to grow in that area, I think we're going to see more of it. It definitely needs to be a part of his life, but in no way am I concerned about that in this moment.
Can we get an update on Lowry, if there was anything more that was seen on imaging, anything like that?
Yeah, there's still.
That worked, which I always have problems with, but it actually turns out that does not allow me to fast forward to part 2 of that, so I'll have to pull that up in a different manner. The other so I thought that was interesting. Ace took 4 free throws the other night. It was only the 4th time all year in any game he's taken 4 free throws. So it is really not a part of his game yet. The part I thought was most interesting, and we'll see whether this works or not. We all know that David's technical abilities on some of this has not been elite over the time. Is that, let's see if this works. Also share tab audio turned on. Okay. This should work. Is it going to? I don't really know. Maybe not. Oh, it's not going to actually. It's so annoying. As David sits here and pauses, we're now doing play-by-play of my own struggles. If I do, actually, I think I actually have a way to make this work. We're going to try it right here. We'll see if this works. Okay. Let's see if this works. If I share the entire screen, then it might work. Yep. All right. Let's see if this works. Here's Will Hardy part 2 on what he means by playing through someone. Oh, that's not what I want. Let's see what happens here. Nope, not going to happen. Here we go. Maybe working. is that screen? After I told it to stop playing. So I'm going to hope that worked. If it didn't, Will talked about playing through the side of someone that when they open up their hip defensively, you play off that hip and you don't give them that space back. And that's how you draw fouls. It's what Keyonte's learned. And it's what Ace has to learn. And it's a pretty interesting way to see all this play out. All right, that is Locked On Jazz today. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you want to join our Everydayer Club, I'd love to have you. At a new member again yesterday. You guys are the best. We'll continue to drop you the various numbers, give you your thoughts, get your insight. You guys are the experts that really want to be super fans, and that's what that program is there for you, and we love bringing it to you. Welcome aboard to Michael Child, who's the newest member of the Locked On Everydayer Club. Go to lockedonjazz.supercast.com. That's lockedonjazz.supercast to become a part of Everydayer program. Follow me on socials at DLock09. Right now, we send you the first ever 24/7 national NBA channel on YouTube, Locked On NBA on audio. Check out NBA Game Night on Locked On NBA, every game, every night. Also, the Big 3 in 30.